Well, hey, here we are, everybody. Welcome. We are here. I've been working on this book, Things That Matter, for 2.5 years, I suppose. Um, and there are a lot of things that I was looking forward to about the book coming out. Number one, like getting the book out so that people can read it, and put together some different things to go along with it. But honestly, like this is what I have been looking forward to more than anything else. And I don't know why for sure. Other than I just want an opportunity, I think, to talk a little bit more about the book and hear from some of you. My hope, I think, with this virtual book club, um, my 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 greatest hope with the book club and the reality of what we get to do, there's maybe a little disconnect. If I could do this in any way possible, I would just sit back and I would just hear from people talking about the book, things that stuck out to them, things that they noticed, questions that they had, ways that they had seen the principles in the book apply to their own life, different changes that they had made at different points, and it aligns with different chapters that they had read. That would be my ideal scenario. Literally, I would just sit back and allow all of you to talk. But of course, that doesn't work super well online when I'm the only one with a microphone and the only one that you can see. And so somehow I want to try to bring these two things together. So I do want our book clubs to be informal. I have some questions that I want to ask of you guys. I want to be able to answer some questions from you guys. However, I also want to make it worth your while. I want to make it worth your time. And so whether you are watching this live or whether you are joining the recording, I do hope you can try to make it live. I just know that coordinating schedules around the world isn't going to work very well. I think we had over almost 9,000 people who have gotten the email to join us live. And so I know that some are going to be joining us as recording. However, if you are live, I'm so thankful that it worked out into your schedule, and I want you to be active in the chat section. I am going to try to read them as best I possibly can while I'm talking. But certainly others are reading the comments and the chats that's taking place. So here we go. Let me jump right in. I'm planning 60 minutes. I think that's probably a good time. We'll see if there's tons of questions about the book, just 2 chapters at a time. Maybe it'll take longer. If there's no questions about the book, or if I ask really bad discussion questions, maybe we'll get done a little bit earlier. But anyway, let me tell you what to expect and what my hopes are. And I can't imagine we don't know why we're here, but maybe I should start there. My name is Joshua Becker, and this is the virtual book club for my book, Things That Matter, Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life. Look, my star means that this is my book club version. My pen means I've got some markings in here. And one of the things that I want to do, I wrote down 5 things that I want to accomplish. And whether we at least frame my goals here, and whether we do all 5 every time, I'm not sure, but I think these will be helpful for us. So number 1, I want to provide just some background to the book. So some author things that you might find interesting in putting together the book and how it became what it is, what it started out as, and what it ended as, where some different stories came from. So number 1, I want to provide some background that I hope you just find interesting. Number 2, I want to point out what I think was most important in the book. And maybe that'll be the most helpful for people. I just want to point out, hey, don't miss this section, this was really important to me. I was kind of building up to get to this one point, and I hope you weren't, falling asleep while you read that page and you missed it. And so, some background information, important points that I thought were interesting. Number three, I don't intend to do a lot of this, but someone asked me, a fellow author asked me if I read reviews that come in about the book. And my answer was I typically read the reviews that come in for about the first 2 or 3 weeks of a book being out, because it helps me understand what points were being missed or what points need to be addressed or focused on. Like, hey, most people see the world differently than this point, and so I want to spend a little more time on here. Or sometimes I read a review, and they'll say that I was saying something that I wasn't actually saying. And so if there's a point for me to step in and say, hey, I don't know if you thought this is what I was saying, but this isn't what I meant, and just let me clarify a little bit more. So background, important points. I'm going to look at some negative reviews that come in from the book. And I actually, just a little background, I expected more negative reviews for the book than I've been getting. I hope if you've enjoyed the book, you'll go leave a positive review about it. But I feel like I took a few controversial stances in there. And so I thought there'd be a little more pushback. Number four, I have some discussion questions that I want to ask of you. And literally, I want to know your answer, and I'll kind of chat through some of them along the way. And then number five, any questions that you have about the book that you would love to ask me. What did you mean when you said this? Were you saying that? How did you decide to do this? Whatever it might be. So background, important points, negative reviews, discussion questions for you, and then your questions for me. So let's get used to number one. You guys have been very good about talking about where you're coming from, and you've been saying some very kind things about the book in that chat section. Make sure you can find the comment section, and let me ask this question just to get us started. How much of the book have you already read? How much of the book have you already read? These four online book clubs, we're going to do 2 to 3 chapters every single week. And today we're just going to focus on chapters 1 and 2. And so if you've just read chapters 1 and 2, that's perfect. If you've read the whole book, then that's helpful for me to know. These are flowing in incredibly fast. I see a lot of just chapters 1 and 2. Okay, chapter 3 up to chapter 5. Read all of it, first 2 chapters, 2 chapters, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, chapters 1 and 2. Okay, good. So I would, is this going to include some spoilers? Someone asked. I don't know. Okay, so this is great. I am going to generally assume that most people have read chapters 1 and 2, that a percentage of people have read the entire thing or have read a little bit farther, which is totally fine. I hope you read the book as fast as you can and as much as you enjoy it. But I'm going to not assume that everyone has read through the entire book. Okay, jump while you still can. Beautiful. Okay, here we go. All right. Let me start by giving the background to the entire book, where it came from. I think that you'll find it helpful as you read through, either as you begin the book or as you read through the next 8 chapters or 9 chapters that you were missing. There is a quote that I included in the book on page 9, which if I were to go back and trace where this book came from, number one, it started with finding minimalism 12 or 13 years ago. I'll get into that in a moment. But finding minimalism and how possessions have become so much of a distraction in my life was like the beginning, the very beginning. I'll mention that in a moment. But this quote that I put on page 9 was really the first foundational thought or nugget, that cornerstone that really I built the house upon. But let me read it for you. And I'm going to read it again. But here's the quote. This is from Seneca. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. But when life is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. It is not that we are given a short life, but that we make it short. Life is long if you know how to live it. I don't remember where I saw that quote or when I saw that quote or who first shared it with me. But as I had been pursuing minimalism, as I had been intentionally owning fewer possessions, I read that quote and I drew a direct connection between the fact that I and so many people waste so much money and so much time and so much energy and so much of life buying things that we don't need. Like just spending our lives chasing physical possessions, taking care of physical possessions, wanting more physical possessions, shopping for physical possessions, managing, organizing, passing on, going through loved ones' physical possessions. Like I read that quote in the midst of becoming minimalist, and I immediately resonated with this thought. When life is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced to realize that it passed away before it was passing. And that was the spark where I realized that for me, minimalism was always going to be about more than decluttering my closet or garage or basement. Decluttering was going to be about removing heedless luxury and no good activity so I could focus my life on the highest achievements. Fast forward years. So thoughts were beginning to spark in my mind around this idea. I had written about it, and I just did an interview last night, and I just appreciated what Troy, the leader, asked me, or the comment that he made. He said, what I'm always drawn to about your blog and about your writing is that it's never just about decluttering. It's always about the bigger reason behind why we're doing what we're doing. And so I think that my writing has always resonated, has always connected with that thought that I'm just not talking about decluttering your kitchen. I'm talking about living a bigger, more meaningful life. And minimalism allows us to do that. So a couple years later, I'm asked to speak at a weekend retreat. And the whole weekend is about minimalism. I mean, I'm coming in to speak about minimalism for a weekend retreat. I got to speak 4 times. And the first night I share, I'm up in Northern California. I don't know if some of you were there, but maybe, perhaps if you were, please mention it. Um, the first evening, I talk about my introduction into minimalism and why I think it's important. Saturday morning, I talk about how do we do this in our lives and how do we apply this in our homes. Saturday night, I turn a corner and I talk not about physical decluttering, but how do we really begin to overcome consumerism in our lives, that our lives are bigger than the things that we buy. And so how do we overcome that? And then I have Sunday morning to speak. And I don't think it took me a long time to get to this point, although writing the talk, outlining the talk took me longer for Sunday morning than any of the other 3, which I had spent a lot of time on. Because Sunday morning became about, let's take this idea of minimalism, removing distractions, so that we can live a bigger life focused on things that actually matter. And let's apply it to other distractions in our world besides physical possessions. Because there are other distractions than just physical possessions. And so I listed out 5, 6, 7. I should have gone back and looked at what my actual outline would have been that morning. But I started talking about money, how money can become a distraction. I started talking about praise and accolades, how this can become a distraction, how technology can become a distraction. I know I talked about how leisure can become a distraction because these were all connections that I had made in my mind or questions that I had started asking myself as I began owning fewer possessions. So, if I wanted to own less stuff, like pretty early on, I began wrestling with this idea of money and what role is money going to play in my life? If I don't want a lot of money just to buy a lot of things, then what's the point of money? Like literally, like what's the point if I don't need a lot of money to live, then what's the point of constantly always wanting more and more money? Which then led me to start asking questions about work. If I don't need a lot of money to buy a lot of things, then what's the point of going to work in the first place? I started wrestling personally as I began writing online and finding a little bit of success. Started wrestling a little bit with like fame and praise and accolades. And so all these different topics had been swirling around in my mind. And then that became the Sunday morning talk, which actually became the outline for the book several years later. Another thing that was very important to me, and by the way, like all these things fit together. I was just talking to a guy earlier today, about work and how I view work and how work is meaningful and how work is fulfilling and how work can be the how we should view work as the thing that we do to help others live their best life so that they can help others live their best life. And all of society benefits when we do work well. And and I'm like, I was explaining this to him, and I'm like, I almost feel like I need to take a step back before I talk about work, and I need to talk about minimalism and physical possessions, how we don't need as much as we think we need, and how that addresses money, and then how thoughts on money affect our view of work, and how if work is all about making the money to buy the things, then talking about work is meaningful and serving others doesn't make as much sense. But when you start to see everything coming together, like what is the goal of my life? If it's not to make a lot of money and buy a lot of stuff, then it can be for more important things. Then this conversation about work begins to work pretty well. So anyway, let me hop in here. As I was preparing that Sunday morning talk, um, I was trying to think of how do I connect these dots here. And I was struck by two stories from my life. If you've done any public speaking or any presenting, you know the power of story. And so I wanted to really introduce this Sunday morning conversation in a way that would resonate with people. And there were two stories from my past that stuck out in my mind. Number one, when I first started writing and blogging, ran across really probably one of the first viral articles that I remember seeing as I got online, and it wasn't just being fed an article, but was like watching articles get shared and what happens. And I ran across Bronnie Ware, Top 5 Regrets of the Dying was the name of the article. And I saw Number one, it was introduced to me. I read it. I clicked on it. Like I couldn't wait to read it. What are the top 5 regrets of the dying? And then after reading it, slowly I began seeing everyone everywhere share this article. And I was like, that is just really interesting how quickly this article spread and how everyone, regardless of your niche or industry, were fascinated with the top 5 regrets of the dying. And so I just made a mental note of it. It's the story that opens up the book, because it became the story that opened up my Sunday morning conversation. And it wasn't, here are the top 5 regrets of the dying, let's work backward from it. For me, it was always, why does this article go so viral? Why are people so fascinated in knowing what are the top 5 regrets of the dying? And it connected to me that none of us want to get to the end of our lives and regret the way we lived. Like none of us want to get to the end and say, I wish I could do it all over again. I would do it differently. And so when we see an article titled Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, we're like, tell me what they are so that I can avoid them because I don't want to think that way on my deathbed. The second story was about my grandfather, also in the first chapter of the book. I was thinking about that article, Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. I sat across the desk from my grandpa. A little spoiler alert, but not a ton for the book. Don't turn off the video. I'll share more a little in detail in the book than I do here. But when my grandpa asked me to take part in his funeral, and I forget how much I mentioned in the actual book, but not only was he content with death coming, but he almost looked forward to it. He wanted to be reunited with my grandma. They were married 60 years and had passed away several years earlier. And he was like, I'm looking forward to seeing Beulah again. He's always been a man of faith, and so he talked about meeting Jesus and how much he looked forward to that. And I was, it was a conversation like I've never had before in my life. Seeing someone not just not fear death, but look forward to it, not because they're trying to get out of pain or they're just trying to escape this world, but like content with how they lived, knowing that they lived their life for things that mattered, so much so that they could get to the end. And I guess as Seneca says, not forced to realize that life passed away before we knew it was passing, but to be able to look back and say, I've lived a full life. I have done what I think I was supposed to do. I've brought good into the world, and I'm ready for it to be over. That story stood in such the juxtaposition of that story and this viral top 5 regrets of the dying article were just so significant to me that it became the opening for Sunday morning. How do we get to the end of our lives satisfied with how we live? And I think the way we do that is by keeping our energy and our minds focused on things that matter, not getting sidetracked by distractions, but staying focused on it. That became the Sunday morning talk, which then became the book. So let me point out some of the important points in these first two chapters that I think were important. And then I'll get into some discussion questions and questions that I have from you. Number one, this is a book about living a life with fewer regrets. I like to say no regrets, living a life with no regrets. But the reality is we're going to have some regrets. Like we're going to always make some mistakes along the way. So how do we live our life with fewer regrets? And I think I summarize it pretty well in the first chapter where I offer this quote, which probably summarizes the book more than anything else. And so I don't want you to miss it. We pulled it out as a pull quote in the book. But I say this, how do we get to the end of our lives with minimal regrets? We choose well. We set aside lesser pursuits to seek meaning in our lives, and we do it every single day. This is really a summary of the book. We choose well. We choose to pursue with our lives things that matter. Number two, we set aside lesser pursuits and money, possessions, accolades, a life of leisure, the new series on Netflix or the next 10 levels of Candy Crush. Like all of those things are lesser pursuits than the most important things that we can do and accomplish in our lives. Not that there's no space for television, not that there's no space for leisure. Like there's room in our lives. They're even essential to our lives in some ways. But when we begin desiring and pursuing those things more than the greater pursuits with our lives, then this is when I think we get to the end of our lives and we say, why did I waste it on heedless luxury and no good activity? It passed before I even realized it was passing. So that's an important point. I include the entire Seneca quote. It's on page 9. And I always have a little fear when I include quotes in books because I know how I read quotes in books, which is usually I skip over them. I skip over when someone lists a long quote in the book because I don't think it's important. But on page 9, I list the entire Seneca quote, and I don't want you to miss it because it was really, like I said at the beginning, like it was the starting cornerstone for everything else that went into the book. And so I added this little sentence at the end of the quote. There's a lot in that excerpt. I said, I'd urge you to reread it, maybe even get out a pen and underline key phrases that stuck out to you. Start with, we waste a lot of it, which is talking about life. And so that was my way to try to keep people from skipping over the quote. Was like, go back and read it again, underline things that stick out to you, spend a little time with this thought because it is going to really shape the rest of the book and the thoughts in the book. The second thing, then the third thing, so how do we live a life with no regrets, which is what the book is about. I had a little, there's a bit of conversation in describing to my editor what I wanted to say because I didn't want to just say how owning a lot of stuff can become a distraction. I didn't want to say how just having a lot of money is a distraction. What I wanted to articulate is when we begin pursuing those things, that this is when they become the distraction. So when the goal is always to have more money all the time, then that takes us away from things that matter. When the goal is just to own more stuff and we're shopping all the time, then that takes us away from things that actually matter. When the goal is, how do I just have a lot of people notice me for what I'm doing, then that becomes a distraction from things that actually matter. And so there's a bit of explaining in that. And so anyway, I think that is helpful. Anyway, the third thing then comes on page 21, which I'll just point out to you because I think it's so important. And we did a survey for the book, and I wanted to have a good understanding of what was important and what was key to people. Anyway, on page 21, we asked the question: do you feel that you are spending your time and resources on less important pursuits at the expense of things that matter most to you? So this was like the heart of the book. Like, do you think things have become a distraction? Do you wish that your life was focused on more important things? And 77% of people said that, yeah, I feel like my life is distracted from those things that matter most, which really confirmed, I think, my desire to write this book in the best way that I could. There's one negative review that I keep seeing. I'll mention this, and then I'm going to ask you guys a question. There's one, not a lot, but a few negative reviews that have popped up. And I want to try to jump on that misconception right now, where they think, where the comment is, hey, not everyone is going to become, not everyone is going to reach the entire world with the good that they're doing. What if I'm just content to raise my family well? And I always want to reassure people, and I thought I did a good job of it in the book, but a couple people have made the comment, hey, the good that you're going to bring into the world, your purpose in life is always going to look different from someone else. And so maybe the good that I was designed to bring into the world was to help people own fewer possessions and live a bigger and free up their life for more important things because of it. But that is incredibly different from my wife's purpose in life, or at least for the last 19 years of her life, which has been raising our two children to be men and women of character and integrity and compassionate and kind. Like for her, for the last 19 years, this has been the thing that has been most important to her. And she's never going to be on the cover of a magazine. She's never going to have a million followers on Facebook. But her good that she's bringing into the world is the good that she was designed to bring. It's what she's passionate about doing. It's the problem that she wants to most solve in the world. And so any thinking that, hey, I'm talking about becoming rich, a rich and famous philanthropist is not the message of this book. It is, I think, about living bigger than ourselves. It is, I think, about thinking to ourselves, how can I bring the greatest good into the world for the greatest number of people? I think that, and what the good is that you can bring into the world is different than the good that I can bring into the world. The greatest number of people that you're going to reach is different than the greatest number of people that I'm going to reach. I guess I kind of got into it a little bit at the end of the book. So maybe they just never finished the book. Like there are some careers and some goods that are going to require you to be well known and to lead a lot of people. But sometimes it's just about serving the people around you, serving the neighbor across the street, serving the kids that are within your four walls, that this is the good that you can bring into the world. So let me transition. And let me ask you guys some questions, and then I'm kind of going to read them off. I haven't been able to read all of them very well, but yeah, it looks like there's some wonderful conversations that have been taking place. Wonderful. Okay, so let me ask you this. There was a question that I asked in the book that has become, it's really taken on a life of its own. I meant it to. I meant it in the book to spark conversation and to spark your thinking around these ideas of pursuing things that matter. But gosh, I almost meant it more as just how I decided to write the book. But I was at a conference in Mesa, Arizona. Charlie Gilkey was leading the conference, and I always mention his name. I don't want people to think I invented this question. This question came from Charlie Gilkey. Someone had just had me on a podcast, and they clipped out me asking this question, and I'm like, oh no, this isn't my question. Make sure Charlie gets all the credit for this question. He asked, if you were to die today, what is the one thing or a few things that you would be most disappointed that you weren't able to complete? And that's when the idea for this book came to my mind. But I would love for you guys to share. I'm actually really excited to hear what you guys would have to share. If you were to die today, what one thing or a few things would you be most disappointed that you weren't able to complete? And I'd love you just to share that in the chat. What comes into your mind? I'm actually going to take a sip of coffee here and let you kind of fill them in. Building relationships that matter, traveling with my family, digitizing family photos. Someone said they're reading Charlie's book. Oh, now they're improve my marriage. Not being able to raise my daughter, revising a one-woman show and performing it again, encourage and influence my grandchildren, educating my kids, improving my relationships. I don't know. 70% of people, when I asked, said that they knew what their purpose was in life. 30% of people did not. I actually thought it'd be a little bit higher, but so you're not alone there. Spending more time with my wife. What if nothing comes to mind? I think that's fine. I don't know. Learning more about God, following Him, simplifying my home, serving God more, finding my purpose, running a half marathon. Help people live holistic lives. I think that however you want to answer that question is fine. However you want to answer that question, the first time you hear it is fine. Someone asked, and I can't find where it was. I don't know if it's on Facebook or on YouTube. I tried to find the question. They asked me about the book. They said, "Are you saying that my purpose needs to be helping other people? Can't my purpose be in life just taking care of myself?" And I wanted to go back because I didn't respond. I didn't reply. But this would be my reply. I think that when you look at all of the studies that are done, the people who are most satisfied with their lives are the people who used their life to improve someone else's. People who not only looked out for their own interests, but also looked out for the interests of others. In some way or another, that their life became bigger than, I'm just here to serve me. I am also here to help others in some way or another. It's what chapter 5 of the book is about. And so if you're not there yet, then that might be. But I think I even I think I include in the book. I don't know how you answer that question about what's the one thing you wish you would have accomplished. However, you answer at the beginning, or what you think your purpose might be in life. But I want you to be open to the idea that living a generous life that serves others and helps others will result in more life satisfaction when you get to the end. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not looking out for our own interests, that we're taking care of ourselves, that we're looking out for ourselves. But we're looking out for ourselves for the purpose of bringing the greatest good into the world for the greatest number of people. And so you can answer the question, what's one thing you would be most disappointed that you weren't able to complete? You can answer it however you want. But I hope as we continue to progress and as you continue to read the book, that it becomes more than just, I want to do this one thing for myself. Unless I want to do this one thing for myself so that I can outpour of that into other people. So I think you'll catch that as you read through the book. Okay. Let me ask you a second question. These were fantastic, by the way. Let me ask you a next question. Seneca said, let me go back to this quote, and I want to know what comes into your mind when you hear this. When life is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize that it passed away before we knew it was passing. What comes into your mind, or what came into your mind the first time you read the phrase heedless luxury and no good activity? Heedless luxury and no good activity. What comes into your mind when you hear those things? Video games, social media, TV, tech, Netflix, TV, shallow people, Twitter, Facebook, games, expensive furniture, clothes, shopping. I'm trying to read what I can here. TV, social media, fashion, drama, getting my nails done. That's funny. Vacations, drinking, iPhone, no contribution to the world, TV, Netflix, games, shopping online, Facebook, entertainment, gossip, celebrity culture. Oh, that's a good one. Scrolling, uber rich people trying to impress others who don't care, private planes. That's funny. The news, Starbucks, gossip, shopping, wanting stuff that only benefits me, worthless production, false people. Okay, brilliant. One of the things that I try to warn people about as much as I possibly can when I read the title, Things That Matter: Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life, is that this book is about a lot more than putting down the phone. That's usually just how I say it, because I think when people hear about overcoming distraction, that like it becomes about, you're right, I've got to put my phone away. I wish I could put down social media. And that is a huge distraction. There's a whole chapter in the book about that, and I was certainly going to include it. But when I think of no good activity and heedless, when I think of luxury, I think of having a lot of money. I think of having a lot of stuff. Like that's what comes into my mind when I read that. Certainly because of the point in life where I had first read it. But I like it really began to become more than just technology. It really became to be about, what are some of the deeper heart pursuits? What are the things that I want? What are the things that shape my day, that don't move me towards things that actually matter? So that is wonderful. I was going to ask what stuck out to you about the book. I always think that's such a helpful question to ask. And maybe if we don't have any questions from you guys, I'll come back to it. But let me ask you one more question, and then I'll take questions from you for the last 10 or 15 minutes. And this is as much for me as anyone else. But what are you hoping we will do during our book club meetings together? So we have 3 more of these, and the next 3 are going to focus pretty specifically on the different topics and the different distractions that we need to overcome. What are you hoping we'll do? When you first heard that I was putting together a book club online, what came into your mind of, I hope he's going to do this, or, oh, I would love it if we would do this during that thing? I would love, just as I think through the next 3 weeks and how to be the most helpful. Um, Support one another, share ideas, find clarity, um, finding depth of life, encouragement, homework assignments, accountability, share ideas and inspiration, share ideas. Uh, um, Stay focused, inspiration. I hope I will learn to become much more focused, inspiration. 5-point outline was good. Your number 3, which was negative reviews, okay, overcoming some misconceptions about the book. Share ideas, connect with others, join with us, apply what we're learning, action the principles, get rid of distractions, highlight the thoughts that matter most to you. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, this is good. That is good. I will make a point, and I think it would be helpful to ask the question, what are you going to do about this? I'll make a point to do that the next 3 ones where we really get into specific distractions, like what are you going to do about this, and articulate. Encouragement. Yeah, I think my heart, like my goal was just to hear from you guys, and maybe even be encouraged myself to hear how the book has influenced other people. But just the fact that we're going to be here and we're going to sit and talk, I hope that you find encouraging and inspiring, and maybe for some even help you get through the book. I don't know if you've ever been in a book club where you're like, I probably wouldn't have even finished the book, except I knew we were going to talk about chapter 6 with a bunch of people. And so I decided to read it. So I think that might be helpful. Solidifies the practice, summarize the chapters. I love that you wrote the book. Thank you. The book is real. The book is so delightful to read. Slow down and apply the book rather than just rushing through it. Okay, these are good. Yeah, all right. I like these. Okay. Well, let's do that. If I were to give you an application point for this one, it would be, hey, make a point right now, put it on your phone, put it in your calendar that you're going to be here next week, same time, Friday at noon. I'm going to be here. We're going to talk about chapters 3 and 4, which is the internal distractions. Talk about past mistakes and talk about fear. So we're going to do that next week. And so I'm not done here, but like if I had to give you an application point, it would be make sure you read chapters 3 and 4 over the next week and make a point to be here. Put it on your calendar, and we'll keep talking about some of these things, and we'll keep encouraging you and inspiring you things as well. Let me answer questions that you guys have about the book. I think probably leaving the last 10 minutes each week would be helpful. Yeah. Jody mentions the life after the daily committing myself each day. That was on page. I know someone mentioned about having the Kindle pages ready, and sorry about that. But on page 15, the one sentence that I need each day to set my intention for the day, I think that's always been a really helpful process for me, and so I would do it. Okay, can you elaborate on the cover? What does the texture in the letters represent? Yeah, very briefly, publisher said, hey, what books do you notice? What covers do you like? And so I sent Atomic Habits, which I know James, and his book is sold incredibly well. And so I said, that's a good one. I sent about 3 or 4 others, and they came back with this, which looks a lot like Atomic Habits. And sometimes even people comment on that. Atomic Habits was like the best-selling book of 2021 or something like that. And I asked them to change the color so it looked a little less like Atomic Habits, but they didn't want to change the color, so that would be just fine. The Becoming Minimalist logo starts with this broad circle, and it moves in to a tighter circle, which was always my interpretation of becoming minimalist, that rather than being scattered and focused on a lot of things, we would narrow our lives down to those pursuits that actually matter. And so I think that they capture that pretty well in the cover, where things that matter is pretty scattered and broken apart, and slowly you key in on things that actually matter, a little more focused at the bottom, which was the thinking behind the book, behind the cover. So I thought that was good. When you say that distractions are the reason we aren't living our purpose, would you say that doubt? Just lost it. Would you say that doubt or debt might also contribute, or would we also call those distractions? So yes, fear. So I'm going to kind of put doubt in with fear. Yes, I think that doubt and fear are a distraction. I don't know if it's the perfect word for it. It's more of a fear can even keep us from getting started in pursuing our passions. Although sometimes fear, as I mentioned in chapter 3, can keep us from fully walking towards those passions, or can keep us from getting started again in pursuing that purpose, because no journey is perfect and there's always highs and lows. And if you get stuck on the lows because of fear, then certainly that's going to keep you from fulfilling the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Debt is a tough one, because debt can come from a number of different reasons. There are some, I just heard today on the news, there's an increase in our local food bank here in Phoenix, 15 to 20% of people, a 15 to 20% increase in people needing help from our local food bank. So there are some economic realities that might result in debt. There are sometimes just, I know so many people who it's just a medical emergency, a medical cost that has sent them into debt. They were responsible, but a medical emergency sent them into debt. And then there's just also a pretty significant amount of people who don't need to be in debt, but they're just overspending the money that they have. They're buying things that they don't need, whether it be spending more in a car than they need, buying a bigger house than they need, eating out more than they need, buying things that they don't need. And so debt can come from a lot of different reasons and a lot of different ways. And I can't make any blanket statements, because sometimes there's just legitimate economic reasons that people are in debt. I tend to think that a lot of it comes from overspending and thinking that we need more than we need, whether it's a bigger house than we need or a nicer car than we need. But I know that's not the case for everyone. And so if the debt is from undisciplined spending, if it's from buying things, chasing things, pursuing things that we don't need, then yes, then that has become the distraction. If debt is a legitimate result of whatever the circumstance is, then I think it becomes the obstacle. I think it becomes the thing in the pathway that we need to focus on overcoming, so that we can walk more focused on things that matter. Okay. Overspending is a distraction. Good. What other questions? Now that you've written the book, what is your new answer to that question? Good question. I don't know. Let me try to hold this on so I can get to that next one. What is your new answer to that question? I don't know. I don't know what that answer is, and I appreciate you asking, because what is the one thing that you would most regret not accomplishing in your life? Like, your answer to that question is your answer until you accomplish it. Like until you prepare your kids for life, then you've done that. And so what is the next thing going to be? And I don't know. This was my answer to that question for the last several years. And it wasn't, let me articulate. The answer to that question wasn't, very specifically, it wasn't, I need to write this book that sells really well. The answer to that question in my mind was, I would regret never writing down succinctly my thoughts on how all these distractions keep us from things that matter. And so my first thought was, would this work as a book? Because books kind of force you to articulate in a reasoned way these thoughts. But if it wasn't a book, then maybe it would have been a very specific blog post that I would have written. But it would have been something that, if I were to die, people could go back to and find these thoughts written down in a helpful way. And so that's the book. And so what's it going to be now? I don't know. I've actually told my wife. The book came out in April. We're doing a book tour in July, taking my kids, and actually my parents are going to come with. And so we're doing a book tour through July. I'm going to take a couple weeks off at the beginning of August, before my kids go back to school. And then I'm going to use this fall, and I'm going to try to decide what comes next. What am I going to do next with my life? Not that I'm giving up becoming minimalist necessarily, but like what am I going to do next? For the first time in my life, I don't actually know what the answer is to that question. I have a couple guesses as to what I would like to do next, but I don't know what it's going to be. Okay. Please clarify. This is one I wanted to get to. Serving other people matters most to you. Are you saying this should be true for everyone, or do I get to decide what matters most to me? What if helping animals is more important to me? I think that's fine, Kathy. I think helping animals can be the thing that's most important to you. I mean, I hope that I don't think that the answer always has to be that you're helping other people. I think that my point is that living beyond yourself, again, if you look at all the studies, living beyond myself results in a life that I'm more satisfied and fulfilled with. And so if that's helping people, if that's helping animals, if that's helping the planet, like it, something bigger and beyond me. I think that's what I meant. So I hope that helps. How do you prevent perfectionist thinking? Someone asked. What are your possible guesses? I'll hold off on that. My wife knows what they are, but I'm pretty careful in mentioning them because I don't want to tie myself in anything. How do you prevent perfectionist thinking? So that's the fear chapter. That chapter 3, you'll find a little bit of that discussion in there. But I overcome perfectionist thinking by realizing that perfection doesn't happen without progress. The first step that you are going to take isn't going to be the step into perfection. The next step that you take is going to be progress towards perfection. And so take that next step that might not be perfect. It might not be 100% perfect, but it might be 5% better than you're doing now. Or as James Clear says, it might be 1% better. But you can't get to perfection without progress. And so even if you want to keep perfection as the goal, I don't have a problem with that. I think that we should all strive for excellence and strive for 100% perfection. Like there's no problem with striving towards perfection. The problem is when we think our next step has to be perfection. Your next step should be progress, which will move you towards that. Um, are you going to use your bonus exercise to decide what you do next? It's kind of the way I think already, and so um, I don't know if I'll pull out the thing and list out, fill in the Venn diagram. It's kind of the way I think already. It's kind of shaped me here. So, how do you distraction from clutter from a relationship? I think that I won't answer that one at that point. I think I get into that a little bit more in the future. Will there be a Bible study for this book on YouVersion? I really like the more of less of one. You can already find one. And then it's a pretty gracious way to end the KC5, but let's do it. What can we do to spread the word about things that matter? Hey, tell your friends, post about it. If you're on Facebook, share a picture of the book on Facebook. Just say, hey, I'm reading this book and I recommend it. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. If you're on any of those things, then mention it. That would be fabulous. If you're not on social media, then hey, tell your friend next time you're having coffee. Tell your spouse, tell your partner, hey, I just read this book and I would recommend it. Man, just conversations is the best way to do it. And I'm just very thankful that you said about doing that. Is becoming minimalist on Instagram. I am on Instagram, but not becoming minimalist. I post some of the things going back and forth. I tend to use Instagram for more just personal stuff, but you can find that as well. Is there an app? There's not an app. There's an app. There's a clutter-free app that I started, but that's not specifically related to the book. Okay. Wonderful. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I'm going to have my small group read and discuss the book. Thank you. Appreciate you and your ideas. Thank you, Josh, for having the book club. I already told someone on YouTube about the book, tagged you yesterday. I gifted 2 books to ladies. Can they get into this webinar using the order number from Amazon? You can just send them the link in an email. Thank you for this. If you enjoyed this, absolutely. This has been good. Okay. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. Honestly, I've been looking forward to this ever since we first had the idea. I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago it was, but thanks for this. Gabriella Tamney, thank you for, I hope that's okay I say your last name. Thanks for moderating and being a part of this as well. And we will be back again next week. And we will talk about chapters 3 and 4. So be sure that you read those chapters. We'll talk more about them. Talk to you later. Bye.